Hi everyone, it is Faebruary. Not easy to say. It is Rebecca down here at Rivercrest Cottage, the Colorful Booknester, and I am participating in Faebruary, which is coloring something fae, which is another term, of course, for fairy. And I was having a hard time deciding what I was going to color, and then because I have tons of stuff that has a fairy somewhere in it, and some really great artists. And then I remembered Fairy Celebrations by Klara Markova. And this was a complete enabled purchase by the ever-enabling Coloring with Vicky and her Coloring with Vicky adult coloring channel. And oh my gosh, it is really adorable. I don't have tons of Klara Markova. I think I have one other book possibly from her, if I remember right. But this one is adorable, and I love it. So I went through trying to find something. Now, I wanted it to have a double duty. Some beautiful pictures in here. Very, I don't know, I mean, very cartoonish, which means really you can do some great colors and just kind of fun. So she has some wonderful mer people, but we're looking for fairies. And I thought, it's also Valentine's Day, so during February, and I thought, this one just exudes love. It just really, really does. And one of the things that Vicky did is she used her, well, I don't know if it was Derwent, now that I think about it. It was Derwent or it was her Neo colors. Not sure right now that I think about it, but I think it might have been her Derwents. And so I have done a bit of a play previously, started a picture in here. Let me just show you where it's at. It is in the early stages, but it kind of shows you what we're going to do first. Well, that is if I can find it. Oh, maybe it's this way. There it is. Oh, it's the next page. Putting down the base with my Derwents, and I really like how they're working here in this book. It's very thick paper, so I don't have to worry really about it going behind, but of course I will be putting a protected sheet. Though the thing is, and this is another thing I really liked about the book, is that on this page you have the beautiful picture, but you don't have necessarily an empty page on the other side, but what you do have, excuse me, is like a simple page. And I like this page because I like to play with maybe the colors I might want to use in this page. So really nice setup with the book. I really, really like it. But today we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with this picture. Now, we have some lovely little fae people that are all cuddled up and looking fabulous. The books, I got to get it kind of bent down. It might be a little bit of a challenge. But as far as, we have some lovely fae people, as I was saying, that right here, absolutely love. But then if you look over here, there as well, you've got some little guys, two little bugs. It looks like maybe even lightning bugs. I kind of like to think of them as lightning bugs. And then down here you have some little ladybugs. And they're all sitting on half moon, or crescent moons, I should say, or what looks like a crescent moon swing. And then in the background, ever so faint back here, we do have a moon. So this is implying this is at night. So this is going to be challenging, but I've done a couple night scenes and I really like how they end up coming out. So I'm going to start as I normally do with the biggest portion, which is going to be my night sky. And I think that if I get that set, then I can really start putting in my highlights next for if there's going to be any moonshine on anything. Not moonshine to drink, but shine from the moon. And then we'll start getting into actually coloring the individuals. So I'm going to start with the background, and I'm not going to activate anything until I'm basically done. Well, I lie. What I will probably do is start up here in the corner and do some ideas I have with the different blues, some purples. I want them kind of mixed together, and then I will go ahead and activate them and see if that's really kind of the colors and what I want to do, and then kind of come down and do the rest. I always say that. So I'm going to start with 1100 Deep Indigo, and this is my Derwent Inktense. So these are, colored pencils basically until you then wet them. And once you wet them, you will, oh, let me bring you in. That's not fun to be that far away, is it? There we go. Once you wet them, they turn to permanent ink, so it's not a watercolor in that traditional sense. I'm sure you guys have probably seen tons of videos, but in case you hadn't, just kind of an explanation. Now, so what I'm doing is just doing kind of random little places with the indigo because I never do my night skies in one color. Y'all know that. I just recently put up a video about how I did the night sky in my Corgi Winter page. And that is how I really do night skies most of the time, especially if I'm doing Prismacolors. But in this case, I'm going to put down a base coat of Derwent and then go back over. Derwent is a really great one for then going back over afterwards. Now I don't push down really, really hard. These have a lot of pigment, and you'll see once I get them, the water activated in them, how pigmented they are. So you don't need to push down a lot, and they last forever. They are a bit expensive, but they last forever. In fact, when I had my flood and lost a lot of my supplies, one of them that I lost was my Derwents. It was the first thing that I replaced. I don't use them enough probably to justify doing that, except for I know I want to use them more. And when I find a book that I can really use them in, that's even better. All right, so that was your 1100 deep indigo. Now I'm going to come in because I kind of like always to have kind of a purple color in my in the background. So now, oh, now we're going to go for deep violet. So we're keeping in the deep world. 0760. And I'm just going to bump it up in there just a little bit right next to that indigo that I've already done. And when we go to activate this, it always sounds like I'm doing a superpower. Was it Super Twins or something like that? Activate. Form of. Okay. Anyway, that was an old cartoon I was referring to, and I have a feeling most people wouldn't even know what I'm talking about. All right, so I'm actually touching the two, and they will move together because while it stays wet, it's still movable. So you can use them similar to watercolors, I would assume. I am not a watercolorist, so I don't know. But I like using them in my books when I can. And I am going to put in one more color, just a little bit, and we're going to go with Lagoon 0810. Now, one of the first things I would tell you with these Derwents when you use them is go ahead and swatch them out. I did a swatch of all of mine, and the swatch book that I had created also was lost in the flood we had down in our basement last year. So, but as we get moving, I'll show you how I do swatches also just on paper, like random paper before, and start kind of planning out what I'm going to use in the picture. But for right now, I just wanted to start working on the background. All right, so I've kind of done it off into a little corner where it's not so easy to be seen as far as if it's really not the colors I want, or if I need to do some extra coloring, if I need to deepen it, or if I'm just going to leave it. So this is always kind of the interesting. So I get my little pot of water over here, and I am using a really tiny detail brush. The brushes that I typically use right now have come from a set that people would use for like modeling trains, painting model trains, or their automobiles. They're very, very precise, which I like. You can see that's got a, see, there you go, really small little, small point. And that's going to allow me to get up here because I don't really want to get it on too many other areas. So once you start activating it, they're going to move together a little bit, the purples, the purple, blue. But I like a sky with multiple. Let's see, can you get in? There we go. With multiple hues of blue and purple. Be careful because a little bit of water hanging off of it. Don't want it to drip. This little tiny brush not only lets me get into these little tiny crevices, but what I like also is it's very dry. It doesn't hold a lot of water, so I don't have to worry about oversaturating an area. Now, I will not use this tiny one over all of the spots, but I am using it here because you can see the detail. And I really don't want to get it up onto the fruits or leaves. So hopefully you can see there how it's kind of mixed. There's a little bit of blue, there's some purple in there. Just gives it a nice deep color, but it's not a static one. You could do this with acrylic paints and then that would be more of a dark, just static color. So, or you could even do it with, you know, markers or whatever, though I would be worried about markers bleeding through to the other side, because there is artwork and something you can see on the other side. So that's why I really like these Derwents, because they don't. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that color combination. I might want to darken it up just a hair. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is start the rest of the process doing the very same thing with those 3 colors for the rest of the dark page, and then and if I want to, I'm going to let this dry right now, and if I'm thinking that I might want to go ahead and make it a little bit darker, I can, or I can wait and use my Prismacolors right over top of it when I go in for all my details. So we'll just see where I'm going to go with it, but I'm going to use these 3 colors for the rest of the page. Alright, so I've got the first layer kind of down, or the first set. There's a bunch of little spots you can see all the way around. And again, that was the Lagoon 0810. And so now I'm going to go ahead and come into my indigo, my deep indigo, number 1100, and start doing what I was doing before, which is just putting it up a little bit close and in random areas, so that when I do mix it together, it's not just a flat background for me. Like I said, I really like that. And then I think what I wanted to do just right now, just to kind of show you, I think I'm going to go in and darken just a little bit. So I'm going to put in some more indigo up here. Now this is what's good, is that I can go over it now that it's dried. And I just kind of want to darken some of these areas up a little bit. So I'm just going to go back in. And when I reactivate, some of that ink that if I didn't get all the pigment activated the first time, might activate it this time. But in general, it should stay in place because it's permanent ink now up there. So I'm just putting in a little bit of the deep violet too. Again, just want a little bit darker. And you know, even with Derwent, I have to do layers, so Even with Derwent, I find ways to do layers. All right, perfect. All right, so like I said, I'm going to go ahead and grab my deep indigo and start the process of, I'll bring in just a bit so you can see the process that I'm kind of doing. Going to start just randomly putting them in and overlapping that lagoon that I had already put down just a little bit here and there. And I will do this just like I did the lagoon all over the page. But I'm overlapping them just a hair. I still do my ovals just because I always worry about having too many lines. I think having the ovals or the swirls, you're less likely to make really harsh lines. And harsh lines, I always seem to notice in my coloring. So that's why. Plus it's just, you know, I probably have a habit at this point too that I always do the ovals. Little tight little circles. I find the Derwents rather relaxing because I don't have, they're a little bit bigger, so in my hands, they're a little bit bigger than my other standard pencils, and particularly my Prismas. But I don't have to press down. You know, I do keep it very light because of how much pigment that they do put out just for a small amount of coloring. You know, when I mean, this is really light on this paper, so you can hold it a little less rigid. You don't have to put the pressure down, and I really like that when I'm doing, especially big pieces, or big portions of a piece, I should say. This isn't a big piece, but you know, the background's going to be the bigger aspect of all of it. Or if, in this case, I'll have a lot of repeating to do. My hands don't get fatigued. What does for me, it's the side of my finger, because I always... And I mean, that's since I've been young, I've always had that little mark. So the side of my finger sometimes gets fatigued more so. Something I wanted to show you is I colored the moon with the Inktense. Now, if I had activated that, we would be done. It'd be a big black spot. But it does erase. Now, I'm using my Derwent eraser. So until you activate it, there'll be a bit of a shadow probably, but I'm going to be very careful about activating it. But it's kind of where maybe I might put a natural shadow of some sort. But if I had, it would have been just as dark as this. So that's a good thing. If you make a mistake when you're putting down your Derwent Inktense, you can still erase them to some degree. So there we go. So luckily I didn't just go, ooh, and forget. Still working on that deep indigo, putting it in places that I didn't want it, obviously. Alright, so that's the second color put down. You can see all the little modeling and that they're peeking through. I have my third final color to go into, and that's going to be that deep violet, number 0760. And going to cover the rest of all the white parts that's supposed to be the night sky. And then we will start the process of very painstakingly and very carefully going through this whole page and all this little detail to go ahead and activate all of the Derwent Inktense. So here we go. I always start at the top of a page. I don't know why that is, but habits. So as you can see, I'm going to go in and find any spots that are still white, and we're going to, and then fade them out into whatever color is next to them, whatever color blue that I have. So I was looking at every little spot, and then I can just use the purple to intensify. Now, one of the things about Derwent is because you aren't loading it up and pushing down really hard, and you make sure and let it dry between every, before going over it with pencils or over with more Derwent, if that's Derwent Inktense, if that's what you're going to do, you don't damage the tooth. So you get really intense colors without damaging the tooth, and then you can go in and do more of your, I don't know, pencil work, is I think what a lot of people call it, where you just go in and you start putting some of that more detail in. And this really hasn't taken me that long to do and to cover this much space, which is great. Whereas with my pencils, it would be probably for the same amount of intensity that we see over here, that probably would be at least 6, if not 8 layers. And I am all about the process. I do really enjoy my process. So that doesn't bother me as far as doing all those multiple layers. But if I'm trying to, I'm slowly losing my coloring time. The amount that I can over, probably since December, it's been cut quite a bit. I am reading quite a lot more, but I'm also planning and getting kind of excited about the gardening season. So what I'm trying to convince myself is I need to do some more coloring so that I can color like plants and flowers, and maybe that'll help me use the time between now and when I really can start anything, much less go out in the garden, because I'm still a good 3 or 4 months away from getting out in the garden, because we can't really do anything until the end of May almost where I live. But I will start some seeds and things here in the house. But there's not a lot. Once you get them, the seeds put in and they start growing, you're just maintaining them until you can get them out into the garden. So maybe if I fill it with lots of flowers and coloring, that'll satiate me a little bit. So I'm finishing up, and then we're going to go into activating with just water the background here. So see, there's all these little tiny places. I'm still trying to decide what colors. Now, the other thing about why I think this is good for Valentines is that we've got this little heart, almost looks like a lollipop that he's brought for her. So I thought I can get double duty out of this page for Faebruary, for Faye, the fairies, and then of course because it's Valentine's. So, and it's very romantic, a little romantic moment. And it makes me think that he went and set this all up. Maybe the guys all set up the little swings for them to sit on, which is really romantic. So yeah, for all these little swings, I like to think he set that one up. He set, and so they're on a triple date. All right, so here we have the background is done. And now I need to go get my water again. And I'm gonna go ahead and get 2 different brushes. The little tiny one I was using, which is right here. Well, we're gonna let it roll in there. And then a slightly bigger one there, so that I can get some of the bigger spots. But I have so much of this little intricate stuff, and this is fun. This is relaxing as well. I'm not even having to think about colors at this point, just the real tiny little bit. So I'm going to start that, and I would suggest in this case, because it will eventually the page will be wet. Of course we need the plastic just in case. But again, this paper is really thick, so luckily that works really well with this. And because I'm using such small brushes with very little water, there's no chance of bleed through. But I do need to remember to go in and activate what I already did over here. But what I'm thinking is you start from the top of the page, either a corner, and come clear across so that your hand doesn't drag through any that is wet. Because with it being ink, I would be worried about getting it on my clothes a little bit, so while it's still wet. So as you can see, actually can you, because, oop, make a mess before I even start. Let's bring this in a little bit more so you can see that. It is activating the bit that I colored over it, but it's not really moving the other parts. So you're just getting kind of a layer. If there was any pigment still left over from the previous that I had not activated, then that would be activated at this point. But remember, I just want to darken some of this down. And you'll leave that to dry. And because I started kind of over there, I'm going to go over here, this corner, because I want that other corner to dry. And we'll just start, and I'm just going to start kind of close to the flower, or the berry, I should say, and the leaves. So that'll probably be what I do first, is all the way around all these very, more of the intricate bits, and then I can bring in my bigger brush to blend. And if you're really good with a brush, then you may not need to even do the small one. You might be able to do it all with a larger one. But again, these are ones I've actually used them for, for acrylic. I didn't spend a whole lot. It was a great set though. I have a lot of really good different sizes, which is good. So here I go in with the bigger one. Now make sure that you don't have tons of extra water, because you don't want to destroy the tooth of the paper, and you want to still be able to control. But you can see how nicely it's melding together. And I can tell already that once this dries, I probably want to go over it again because it's not as dark. But that's what's nice, I can do that. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish out this little bit here. Oops, sorry about that, it was my phone. I'm going to finish this little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and darken up this my stuff, because obviously I could go heavier. So I'm going to go back over it with some more pigment so that maybe I can save myself in the future. See how dark this is over in this corner? That's really more what I want to get over here. So I'm going to go in and start and do that with all the places before I even activate it. So I'll bring you back when I'm ready to start up the activating again. So because when I started to activate it wasn't as dark as what I wanted, I went ahead and went over almost the entire page, and I just covered even the ones that were underneath. I just covered it kind of evenly with 0830, which is navy blue, and then I kind of came over and was trying to darken the edges even a little bit more so that it's really dark in here, and maybe the moonlight is shining in this area, and that was with dark purple 0750. So now I'm going to see if this is closer to the color that I was hoping to get to before. So, and I did let this dry up here, so I'm going back in. Yeah, there we go. That is a much better. Let me bring in. Much, much better how dark I wanted it. There we go. It was really easy to do too, and by doing that overall, It makes it even more kind of cohesive, but again, you get kind of that movement with the colors. So yeah, much happier about this. More what I envisioned for my night sky. All right. Now, one of the things to note when you're doing this is you will pick up the ink onto your brush, and so that will carry for a while, and as you keep picking up more, every once in a while it gets really dark. So right there I've got a lot on that brush, because it doesn't go permanent until you really let it dry. Look at this paintbrush, has a really fine point, so I'm able to use it a little bit more. But I am picking up pigment as I'm going along onto this brush, so every once in a while you need to start back over, unless you want that darker, or the mixing of those colors more. It's one of the things I like about them. And again, so this is like painting with markers, because it is permanent ink when it gets done, and you can get the intensity of a marker. But I like it because it doesn't go through. So there's no alcohol, so it's not an alcohol marker. So it doesn't go through. And I can mix and match colors as I want them. And I feel like with the pencils I have even more control. And I get more of a watercolor or a painting look. And then there's no white coming through, as you can tell, which is always good. That's what makes them a really good base. Now what is really challenging is if you wanted this to be a very solid blue, it does present challenges unless you go over it or really heavily. But I like, since I just don't ever see a night sky that's a solid color necessarily, or at least when it comes to my coloring, I like to have a little bit of changes in my skies so that they're not just one flat color. Though I have seen some really neat looking, there we go, some really interesting and neat pages with almost like a matte background. It makes whatever's in the foreground really pop out, so that's really cool. So I'm going to go ahead and use my little guy here because this is really intricate. And I am trying to not get any of the ink to go over into the greenery if I can help it. Yeah, I think going over with those 2 extra layers has been really the way to get that deeper color. So now here around the moon, I'd like it to be a little bit lighter, not as intense, because I'm thinking of the light of the moon. Oh, looks like I missed some spots there. And I'm going to go ahead and take my lagoon, because like I said, I want that lighter, but I missed some in between spots. But I want a little bit lighter around the moon so that maybe I can add and make it almost feel like it has a little bit of a glow. There. I think that's everything. I'm sure I've missed some other spots. Alright. And as I said before, I like starting more from the top of a page. So when we're talking about the top and moving down, so that as this dries, I'm not going back into it and I'm not making a huge mess. So here I go into here, and I'll just go in and activate all of my Derwent Inktense colors. So one of the things I like about the Derwent as well is that when you get to these little the crevices, for lack of a better word, here in the on the books where they go into the binding, because this moves so nicely, I can easily get in there and color into that crevice, which, you know, when you're doing with pencils, you either end up with these really weird little lines along the crevice, or, you know, it's just really heavy-handed because you're kind of falling into it, or you leave it alone, which some people do. But I like that I'm able to do that with these Derwent to get in there and make sure that all the way to the edge of the paper is colored. So I like that. So I think that this is going to kind of be the end for the first episode. The background is exactly as I was hoping it would look like. The next process would definitely be the moon, and then I think I'm going to bring you back in also to share with you how I do the berries, because blueberries would just disappear in this blue background, so blueberries are an option, though that is definitely what they look like. But red I think is too powerful, so I've got a different idea for how I'm going to do the berries in the background. So thanks for joining in and for listening to me Babylon as I use my Derwent Inktense to create this romantic night background. As I always say, keep coloring those pages until for next time. Bye for now.